We know that older adults say we have a fastly aging world population, right? So there are so many risks for older adults. Older adults often they are faced with age-related impairments, things like hearing losses, or even vision loss, or in certain cases motor control, things like arthritis, and all these. So, and also in addition to this, sometimes they face chronic diseases, things like heart rate diseases, or even sometimes hypertension related to blood pressure and so on. And we know from the keynote this morning actually that if we have more engagement and also at the same time, like if we monitor the evolution of blood pressure, it gets us to improve, it can help with the adults or people who are facing this condition to improve their own conditions. So if they are trying to do this, so it shows that there's a need for self-management or there's an importance for self-management. But technology plays a major role in this, right? So because we have so many wearables nowadays, blood pressure cuffs, smartwatches, all these devices are helping people in general to collect amount of data or have data. But one problem with this is like we are generating a lot of information, and from this information, there are so many insights that can be hidden, right? So often as human, we tend to create our own meaning or tend to find meanings from information. And ways we do this semantically, we try to, we call this semantics in the sense that we're creating or finding meanings. So ways we do this, we create sometimes guidelines, conventions, things like, for instance, for blood pressure, we have thresholds, so we help people to differentiate from this using things like color here. You might have green representing the normal range, and these sometimes they become convention when you are designing, right? Designing systems. So they can have things like icons, colors, and also and so on. But the problem with these is like there's a real trade-off in the way we are presenting these when we're designing data presentation or presenting data to people, right? So the information is coming from loads of sources, different curves, different wearables, and at the same time, we have different. Predominantly, we are showing this visually, which can have some issues as well. And at the same time, one issue is that sometimes we lack a bit of context or situating the purpose of collecting this information. So all this is called help data representation, basically ways we present the data. But what does literature say about this? So we know that older adults are facing age-related impairment. This is obvious. So we have some stats saying that 45 people over 45, they are more prone to risk like visual acuity. So which means that they are more prone to vision losses. And at the same time, for older adults, they are becoming more slower in terms of interaction or even information retrieval. And this can vary as well because older adults is not they are not like a homogeneous group. So their needs or preferences because of all those age-related impairments vary, right? And in terms of the semantic, like the way we get meaning or create meaning when we're building those interfaces, there's so many issues, right? Usability is not enough because you might have nice colors that map the information, you might have icons, but are you actually capturing the situated context or the context of the lived experience of the person exploring this data? So we know as well meaning is co-constructed in the sense that my own experience will kind of guide the way I understand something because it's not necessarily the way it was designed. That's why we have human-centered design or even user-centered designs and all this. And we have a huge debate between minimalism and aesthetic. So how much is too much when we are creating or presenting information, or what is too much or less even. So this is a huge problem in general. So why do we need to explore the perspective for the adults? So in this study, we had a set of studies, actually two studies. So we were trying to find, first of all, for the predominant way we are using visual representation, what are the key challenges or the key accessibility issues? Because if we're talking about the usabilities and all, and at the same time, we wanted to capture the context, the lived experience, because that's also influencing the meaning or the way they get the meaning from the information, right? So we had first a study with other domain expert. Domain expert in this case for us was basically people who work with other adults, people who design data representation or visualization, and at the same time as well a CI expert and so on. And we had as well 16 other adults, which is part of, we were part of a second study where we kind of recruited them and we had people over 65. We're trying to get their own understanding of the data representations and at the same time, what are the challenges they face when they're interacting with data. And to do this, we curated a list of, I would say, a set of 4 data representations. So for us, have data representation is not just a graph, so it's a wall screen, because the wall screen create or provide context in a sense of is part of the data representation. So we had 4 data representations, 2 for blood pressure and 2 for sleep. And we had experts evaluating these, and we also have other adults evaluating the exact same set of data representation. And we use a tool which is very important to us, because we use a tool called, in design thinking, called I Like, I Wish, What If, because what we found is that for other adults, you might have a study with them and they're not giving you, there's a risk of bias in getting the feedback, in the sense that, is it a test, or I don't want you to feel like I'm giving a negative answer. So this tool helps us to gather constructive feedback on the data representation to representing to them. And quickly, I'm not going to focus on this because all this quantitative part is explored in this paper. So these were basically the quantitative issues, I'll say, issues found within the data representation, mainly from the expert point of view. But we tried now to kind of have I would say, a complementary analysis of both the experts and the other adults. We had 3 key, we used thematic analysis for this. So we had 3 key themes that emerged from this comparison of the 2. So the first one is health engagement and agency. So the way we present information, in this sense, semantic intent. So when you are designing data representation, the way you compose the data representation, or the way you present the information, should give the user or the adults the intention behind the information being presented. And at the same time, for the adults, they kind of, as well, they were reporting that it kind of is hard for them to interpret the intention behind the data presented. It's not just, okay, this is what we hope people will get from this, but at the same time, can they actually understand this? And they can't do this because sometimes older adults, they have this concept of procedural learning, or in the sense that they learn as well from others. So all this adds to the interpretation aspect. And another theme was basically barriers to interpretation, because if they have issues to interpret the information, to get meaning from it, so what are the barriers to this? So one, which was really very flying, was basically semantic confusion, because it's predominantly visual. So the way you compose elements on, let's say, a screen, on a smartwatch, or even on a tablet matters. So how much is too much? Back to the minimalism and aesthetic. So all this can actually add confusion, or even in some aspect, it can even add more confusion if you remove also some elements as well. So for instance, one participant saying that the graphics didn't mean intent to them, because you have graph literacy, you have all this. What if the person doesn't have the experience with this prior elements? And we have affordance breakdown, very important, because going back to age-related impairment, so an older adult might have issues with dexterity. So the way we hid basically functionalities behind buttons, behind all those different menus, can actually obstruct affordances, in the sense that they can find, or they can dig deeper to get more meaning from the data, or overall from the information presented. And again, going back to the point regarding minimalistic and aesthetic. So we have simplicity. So should it be to make the whole data representation giving the person more comfort in the way that they are exploring the information, or is it actually hindering their own exploration? And lastly, often this is neglected when we are designing a data representation or even presenting of information. So the emotional and psychological responses of the data. So it's very important to make sure that, as they were saying, that some people they experience white coat syndrome. So we want them to continuously monitor this information because long-term impact is good for them to change their behavior. But some people they feel like I'm afraid of the result. I'm afraid of looking at my next measurement because what if it's too high and now I feel a bit bad or I did something. I think you said someone was presenting was saying like, well, what if the person had a drink and then they don't want the doctor to know and so on. So these type of emotional psychological responses are very important, and also very importantly data narratives. So the way things are framed, or even adding context, the way the context is framed matters. So are we just saying, okay, this is 128 milligrams for their blood pressure, or are you adding more context saying that this is exactly your reading, or this is the reading for this week? So emphasizing had more context and more meaning. So what are the implications behind all of this? So after we've done all of our findings, so there's a huge inconsistency in the way we compose meaning when we are creating health data representation. So the way we arrange stuff can actually lead to confusion. That's one thing we learned from all this. And then at the same time, this is actually one point affordance rooted in familiarity is backing existing proofs in literature that older adults they tend to refer to familiar terms when they are kind of exploring things. So affordance within familiarity is something that is very important. And at the same time, in the design, creation, or even development of health data representation, it's very important to have semantic testing. So not just usability testing. Semantic testing is enforcing the fact that, okay, are we actually making sure people understand? Not just they can use it, but they can understand. And lastly, there's a need for alternative health data representation. So because everything is predominantly visual. So what about people who have basically low vision? What about people who have dexterity? So do we have other ways to present this? So this is going back to multimodal representation. So can we use other senses like auditory cues, haptics, and so on? And quickly, the reason I'm talking about the imitation is to introduce the design implication. So this was basically to create this, to make this more accessible. So we use screen captures that we kind of had to print and also create realistically on tablets. So there's a need for real world context. And so what's the implication of all this work? So the implication is basically we need alternative data representation that are tailored to age-related impairments. So therefore, how do we make sure that we preserve the meaning across those new modalities? So if I'm moving from visual, I'm going to use sound. How do I make sure that the same meaning for the health data is preserved or even conveyed across? So one way we're doing this is by introducing this concept of semantic mirroring, so which is a recomposition of the way we arrange elements. So we have the surface elements, interpretive elements or layers, and action layers. So surface elements would be basically anything that we kind of usually use in design semantics, like using color to map to specific element, using icons. So all these are surface elements that can add specific meaning. And on top of this, we have the interpretive, beneath this, we have interpretive layer, which is basically what else can we add in terms of more context or even more narrative, as we were saying. So emphasizing on because sometimes we guess that, oh, they'll know that this is the reading for today. Often you open an app and you just see the big numbers, so they're assuming that you would know that this is today's reading. So it's good to put emphasis on basically the narrative as well. And action layers. So what about the person moving throughout this? So is it adapting to dexterity issues, for instance, in the way that we should consider a new set of interactions that are more streamlined and more adaptive to them. But how do we make sure that now this is something that can be applied? So there's a need for semantic grammar. Semantic grammar is that concept where the same way in languages you can mix words to create sentences that make sense and hold meanings. So we should be able to mix the different layers to actually preserve or convey the same meaning across modalities. So